Shamatha technique. Shamatha meditation, which is basic meditation, is actually quite simple. It involves concentrating on an object, it could be any object, and allowing the mind to come to rest on the object for as long as we wish. Now, the object can be anything we want. Typically, it's like a twig, or a pebble or stone, maybe a spot on the wall, or just nothing at all. There's even such a thing as formless meditation, but the most common object used for training in meditation often is the breath. We sit and concentrate on the breath, watching it coming in and going out of our lungs. But any object can do. There are no rules that I've ever seen about which objects must be used or any that should not be used. It's sometimes said that using a small statue or image of the Buddha brings extra credit, but in a pinch, anything will do. Anyway, it's not about the object that we use, but it's about the process of meditation that we're looking at here. We don't examine the object that we pick with our mind, like, oh, this is a nice stone, or this is an interesting twig. But we just allow the mind to come to rest on the object. The focal support, the twig, the stone, the breath, is just a reminder to be undistracted. It's simply a method of placing the mind. We're not meditating upon the focal support itself. So this is not like contemplation or thinking about a stick. This is a technique that we're learning. It's pure muscle memory. It's a habit that has to be learned. And the process is simple. Let the mind come to rest on the object, the twig or the pebble, and hold that focus. Stay focused. They say to hold that focus like you would hold a raw egg. If you hold it too loose, it will slip out of your fingers and break, fall to the ground. And if you hold it too tightly, you'll crush it. So just try it, and you'll soon see that it's not that easy. But that's what we're here to learn. So we're focusing on an object. But if we're beginners, and I've been a beginner for too long, our mind wanders. And it's going to do this for most of us. And we wake up a little later from a thought or a daydream. Maybe we're thinking about what is going to be for lunch or something, and then we realize that we stopped some time ago resting on the object, focusing on the object, and so we become aware that we've stopped practicing. And then very, very gently, we just bring the mind, the focus back to rest on the object again, and we continue. Now, there's no use spending even 1 nanosecond on beating ourselves up or feeling bad that our mind has wandered, because this would be like adding insult to injury. Once you've realized that your mind has wandered, you wake up from your daydream, just leave it go at that and continue. In fact, shamatha meditation is an endless series of beginnings, always bringing the mind back to the present moment. You can't tell or force the mind to stay on the object. It doesn't work like that. If you make an effort, if you try to rest the mind, try to bring your mind to rest, it's going to go every which way but loose. So what we do is learn to allow the mind to rest naturally, which it does all the time when we're not trying to do it, when we have a moment of just quiet. So it may even be that we seem to have to use reverse psychology in order to get the mind to do what we want. this whole thing is how we learned how the mind works, which is really what meditation's about. Before we really can get down to much, we have to find out all the crazy stuff that the mind does. So we should take note of this. This is called learning to meditate. Eventually, the mind will naturally come to rest wherever you want it to. And the key word here is rest. It took me years to realize when when they said rest, they meant rest like you and I know rest. Take a break, rest the mind, allow the mind to rest. So shamatha meditation is all about allowing the mind to come to rest naturally. And it's a two-way street. As hard as it is to get the mind to rest on an object, once you learn how, it's just as hard to dislodge it. The Tibetans give a wonderful analogy of a ship far out at sea, so far that there's no land in any sight. And on that ship is a bird. And the bird, in its freedom, flies away from the ship. But sooner or later, it returns and finds rest on the ship. Now, next we're going to take a look at, how do we meditate? What kind of posture do we use? As for what posture to use in meditation, I'm going to go over it below. The traditional, what's called the 7-point posture, that has been used for centuries, actually thousands of years. And if you can comfortably do that, by all means use that. It's authentic, it's traditional. The Buddha used it, Hindu saints use it. But if you can't, don't worry about it. Just about any posture will work. Sitting on a chair, lying down, whatever you've got. The point is to first sit comfortably so that your posture is not distracting you. You've got to be comfortable. It's that simple. I should point out that if you can sit straight and all of that, there are real benefits from doing so, from keeping your spine straight. But not all of us can do it. At least make an effort to learn the 7-point posture and then relax the posture from there so that you're comfortable. So let's go over the traditional 7 points. It's often called the 7-point posture of Vairochana. Point 1. If you can, which I can't, sit in Vajra, full lotus position. If you cannot, just sit loosely cross-legged in what's called the Sattva position, with one leg kind of tucked in, the other one kind of hanging out a bit. Or sit in a chair. Point 2. Touch the tip of the thumb of each hand on the first or second joint of the ring finger, and then close the fingers into a very relaxed fist. Then place the 2 fists palm downward on the knees, and try to keep the arms as straight as you can. Now, some people's arms are too long, so an alternative position is to place your hands in the position of meditative equipoise, with the left hand palm upward on your lap, then place your right hand palm upward on top of your left hand, 4 finger widths below the navel, until the tips of the 2 thumbs barely touch. So you can use whichever of these 2 positions is most natural. I use the second one myself just because my arms kind of stick out too far on my knees, so I just feel naturally comfortable with it. So point number 3, without breathing, tighten your sphincter muscles, draw the abdomen up, and then very, very gently relax those muscles back to their normal position. So you pull your sphincter muscle up tight, then you just let it kind of relax. The 4th position, the 4th point, straighten your spine so that it resembles an arrow, including your lower back. And do this so that you don't lean forward, backward, or from side to side. And again, this is one of those things where you straighten it up and then relax. You know, if you can't comfortably be straight, then you're not going to be quite straight, but the important thing is to be comfortable while you're sitting. Point number 5, focus your eyes on the nose and extend that gaze 4 finger widths from the tip of your nose above it. Let the gaze just rest there. Leave your eyes open and try not to let them wander. As you learn to meditate, they won't wander because you'll be doing something else with your mind. It's important not to close the eyes, because if you learn to meditate with eyes closed because it just was shutting some, the outside out, it's very hard to change that habit. And it's so easy to start daydreaming and falling kind of to sleep or half asleep with eyes closed. So leave the eyes open. Point number 6, rest your tongue flat and somewhat tightly against your upper palate, neither on the teeth nor at the roof, but gently in the middle, just touching where the teeth are at the top of your palate. And close your lips, but leave a slight space between your teeth. And the final position, number 7, bend your neck a bit, pressing down on your Adam's apple with your chin, or pointing that way, so that it resembles, as the Tibetans say, an iron hook, which I'm not sure what that looks like. But pull your chin in slightly so there's a very light pressure on your voice box. Those are the 7 positions, or the 7 basic points of posture. And it's worth taking some time to consciously do them at the beginning, even though it's a total pain. And then you can learn to relax into the whole posture, so that at the beginning it's going to be very painful and artificial to constantly think, oh, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Do that for a while. Build a habit, and then forget about it. Now let's talk about how long you practice. Back in the early 1970s, when I was first getting into some of this stuff seriously, it was popular to ask students, even beginners, to sit for a very long time. And Zen Buddhists often recommend that the benefits of extended periods of sitting practice, like all day long, that was the way to go. And, I went to all-day sessions, and I sat as best as I could, and people walked around and whacked you with a stick on the back if you, for whatever reason they thought that you needed a little wake-up call. However, this is not what's being taught here. Of course, if you love to sit for hours at a time, that's wonderful. But often beginners have a little bit of trouble doing this. So the greatest teachers that I've read or met have all said the same thing. Do many short, enthusiastic practices, even if it's only for a few minutes. Much better than to force yourself and then build a habit of forcing yourself and hating what you're doing, even if you don't realize that's what's happening. So the point there is what's called don't stain the practice. In this tradition, even the great Mahasiddhas, as I mentioned, recommend many short sessions rather than pushing yourself to longer ones. And the reason is simple. We must be very careful not to stain our meditation practice or meditation process by forcing ourselves to do more than we feel like. Of course, if we're just being lazy, we should push back a little bit. And we should persevere in our intention to do at least something. However, if instead of developing a habit of joyful or at least neutral sitting practice, instead we force ourselves to do it against our will again and again and again, and gradually develop antagonism against the practice itself, a kind of push me, pull you kind of attitude, this is not good. In fact, it's quite easy to stain our practice through just not wanting to do it. And the delinquency that quite naturally arises forcing ourselves, this goes on until every time we think of practicing, a good feeling does not come to mind. We have already poisoned our own mind stream. So it's very, very common to stain our practice until we no longer really want to do it, and then we just don't do it. This is for many a serious obstacle to meditation. It's one that's hard to undo. Now, this is something that I call taking the temperature of the mind. And I found this super useful early on, especially. And just for anyone, even if you don't think of yourself as a meditator, this is like a good thing to do. Anyway, there is a bonus for those of us who meditate, even if we do it for just a very short session, if we meditate at the same time every day. A meditation session, however brief, offers us a chance to quickly take our mental temperature. I was surprised at how often I don't even know how wild my mind is on a given day, how upset and crazy I'm feeling. But even a minute or so of trying to meditate shows me immediately how fast my mind is moving, how distracted I am, and how far away I am from being able to let the mind rest. On other days, it's clear that my mind is moving gently, and it's much easier to practice meditation. This can be like a big help, especially if you're about to head into a meeting or off to some event where you are required to be there 100%. I find it better to reschedule the meeting than to try to do anything that requires patience or understanding when I have neither. So that's just my experience. Take your temperature, your mental temperature, and see what the day is like for you. And here's one of my favorite ones, again, that comes from the Tibetans. They have a slogan that says, "Rest and relax like a bundle of straw when it's cut." Now, it took me some years to understand that when the meditation instruction said to let the mind rest, they meant the same kind of rest. And I mentioned this earlier, the same kind of rest you and I mean when we use the term R&R, like actually just rest, take it easy. In fact, the tradition has a wonderful analogy, as I mentioned, of how you are supposed to sit and relax. They say that the body should rest loose, like a bundle of straw whose cord has been cut. It's a perfect analogy. If you have ever seen one of those old-style bundles of straw with a single cord at the center holding the whole bundle together, if you gently stick a knife blade under the cord and sever it, the straw doesn't just fly all over the place, but instead it almost imperceptibly just slumps or relaxes completely. I have seen this myself, and we need to let our poor bodies just let go and relax, after making them as straight as we can, of course. So anyway, that's the appropriate way to position the body for practicing meditation. So sit up straight and then relax as it is, as they say. We've talked about the body, talk about allowing the mind to rest. It's not just our bodies that we're after, learning to teach meditation, although that's part of it, but ultimately it's our minds that must rest. And we don't just rest our mind, like forcing our mind to rest, you rest. It doesn't work like that. Instead, we have to learn to allow our mind to come to rest naturally, like it does when we're not even paying attention to it. We already know how to let our mind rest, but just not consciously, not when we want it to. So consciously allowing our mind to rest naturally is something that we learn to do through meditation. It's one of the great things. Now, it's a fact that beginning meditation practitioners soon learn that trying to get the mind to do anything at all usually backfires. It's like one of those little magnet pairs of dogs that I had as a kid that had opposing fields. Trying to push them together always just made them fly apart. A great analogy that the Tibetan teachers use is that of a bird in a cage. If you lock a wild bird in a cage, all it thinks about is how to get out, how to escape. But if you take that same bird and leave the cage door open, as often as not, at night, it will voluntarily return to the cage just because it's safe. So the mind is something like this. You and I can't force the mind to do anything. No matter how willful we might think we are, but if we just relax, if we allow it to be itself, it will naturally just rest. Trying to force our mind to concentrate on this object of meditation, like the breath or a pebble or a stick, it just sends the mind in an opposite direction. However, allowing the mind to rest naturally, it will just gently rest on whatever object we wish. This is what learning meditation is all about. An analogy that I like is like when you're sitting at the computer and you take the mouse, and with the mouse you place the cursor on the screen and take your hand off the mouse. The cursor just stays there until you want it to move again. That's what meditation can be like. We learn to let the mind rest like the cursor rests on the screen, and it will just stay there until we want to move it.